Storms of controversy swirl. This week on Columbus on the Record, we're joined by Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News, Joe Ingles, State House reporter for Ohio Public Radio, Derek Clay, Democratic strategist, and Mike Gonidakis, Republican strategist. The OSU investigation into allegations of sexual abuse of athletes in the 80s and 90s has been a story since April. In recent days, though, it has exploded with allegations that a former assistant wrestling coach knew of the abuse but brushed it off. That former coach is controversial conservative Congressman Jim Jordan. Several wrestlers say Jordan knew or had to have known that Dr. Richard Strauss was assaulting athletes. Jordan denounces the allegations.
Conversations in a locker room are a lot different than people coming up and talking about abuse. No one ever reported any abuse to me. If they had, I would have dealt with it. And what bothers me the most is the guys that are saying this thing, I know they know the truth. I know they do.
Other members of those wrestling teams and coaches defend Jordan, saying he did not ignore allegations of abuse. Not surprisingly, Jordan's many enemies have piled on, demanding the congressman resign. Laura, this story has been around. So what is sparking the intensity of it now? Is it Jordan or is it the abuse allegations?
Well, one of the big whistleblowers on it, Mike DiSabato, kind of raised the flag to say, you know, Jim Jordan knew about this or should have known, but he's denying knowledge of this. And so I think that kind of triggered the national media to say, what, Jim Jordan? Like, you know, he's a political lightning rod in Congress. He's, you know, the Freedom Caucus guy. And so I think that the national media has kind of jumped on it and really, you know, has to do with two things, politics and then also Big Ten. Penn State and Michigan State both had their sex abuse scandals investigated, blew up and caused all kinds of trouble for the current administrations in those universities at the time.
Now, Richard Strauss has passed away. Perhaps that's one reason why it was sort of flying below the national media's radar, because it wasn't like Larry Nassar, where he was in court and he was still around. But Jim Jordan, do you believe him?
Absolutely. I've known Jim for 15 years. Look, he stood up against the Speaker of the House from his own state, John Boehner. He stood up against the Department of Justice, the IRS. He would have stood up for his students, his teammates, the people he coached if he knew of any issues whatsoever. Look, 15 wrestlers came out already and said, no, this didn't happen. Jim did nothing wrong. The head coach came out and with a letter and said, what has been said about Jim Jordan is absolutely wrong. And he goes on to say more things. Gordon Gee has come out and said, I didn't know anything about it either. So, you know, unfortunately, there appears to have been a crime. Something terrible happened to some students. But yet, instead of focusing on where the system broke down, or more importantly, the accuser who's passed away, we're focusing on politics and Jim Jordan, who didn't do anything wrong. And he's welcoming an investigation to figure out what happened.
Well, the bottom line is, if you're in a position of authority, like being a coach, at what level do you bring it to somebody else's attention that even if you heard a rumor of something that was going on, is it your responsibility to investigate it? And I think that answer is yes. You know, there's a lot at stake with this investigation. As Laura mentioned, the things that have went on with Penn State, Michigan State, this could be a huge financial blow to the university if this thing blows up and the lawsuits start flying and everything. But as a person in an authoritative position, there should have been some responsibility to investigate.
And that's the thing. That's the thing, Mike. If you think about it, these athletes, when they're student athletes, they are in a position where they might have scholarships, they have certainly playing time, relationships with coaches to consider, and they might not want to be out there being a whistleblower, putting things out on the record in writing that would be investigated at that point, especially when you consider the time. It was back in the 80s. There was a lot of stuff that happened in the 80s that doesn't fly right now.
Laura, this is eerily similar to the whole band controversy. I'm talking about Larkins Hall. This was the facility that housed the wrestlers' locker rooms of other athletes. Also, it was intramural and recreational locker rooms, a huge locker room shower facility. Everybody seemed to know that there was a lot of inappropriate stuff happening there, but it wasn't stopped for many years.
The wrestlers who I've talked to, both in the supporting Jim Jordan camp and saying that he should have known camp, they tend to agree that Richard Strauss took extended and multiple showers with students from multiple teams. and that most people thought that was weird, at least.
Yep.
And then there's another layer of former student athletes who say that it went beyond that, that for exams for like a twisted finger or something like that, they would go in and he would insist that they drop their drawers to have their lymph nodes checked or what have you, and that there would be some inappropriate touching in that regard. I think that Joe's right. I think that a lot of these students, although they were, strong athletes, they still are in kind of a tough spot because, they don't want to impact their time. I'm sure that most of those students, their whole goal in life was to get to Ohio State and wrestle there.
So does an assistant coach, Mike, have a duty to report something that's creepy?
Well, I guess depends on what creepy means, but I
Well,
think
creepy,
common
taking
sense,
several
yes.
showers a day.
Well, yes, I would if I was an assistant coach, absolutely. But at the end of the day, we started off this program. There's accusations about Jim Jordan when in fact he knew nothing. He's come out and said that. People have.
He said there was
corroborated
locker
his
room
story.
talk.
Yes, he did say.
But he's careful. He said there was locker room talk, but he never saw or heard of abuse allegations.
It does not appear to be a Penn State issue. This does not appear to be a Michigan State issue. But just to throw Jim under the bus because he happened to be an assistant coach there, I think is very inappropriate.
Well, I think also the difference with Penn State and Michigan State is that involved minors.
Yep. So, all right, our next topic. Ohio is divided, Congress is divided. The U.S. Supreme Court is divided, and there is no sign that's going to change anytime soon. Brett Kavanaugh has begun his effort to win over members of the Senate as he tries to become the next justice of the Supreme Court. He has a long, accomplished legal career. He's a strong conservative. Ohio's senators had two different first impressions. Rob Portman said Kavanaugh is everything you'd want in a judge. Sherrod Brown questions many things, including Kavanaugh's support of consumers. He says it's not there. Michael Dacus, you were in Washington for this announcement. You're head of Ohio Right to Life. How confident are you that this justice, if confirmed, and the court would overturn Roe versus Wade?
Well, not at all. I mean, President Reagan appointed Sandra Day O'Connor, and she wrote the Casey decision, which upheld abortion. Anthony Kennedy, appointed by a Republican, always was the swing vote in favor for abortion. But, the times have changed, and vetting is a lot different today. I would hope with the Federalist Society's seal of approval, we're going to have a justice here that, that doesn't favor one side or the other on the issue of abortion or whatever the case is, Second Amendment, but applies the law as written. What we've always said is we want strict constructionists like Anthony Scalia and other members of the current court to not make policy, because we can't vote for these people. Okay, we can vote for a governor, a congressman, a senator, and that's how we have representative government. But appointments to the Supreme Court are for life, and we don't have any say in it. So all we're saying is appoint a judge. In this case, Kavanaugh. He will get appointed, mind you, and he will get confirmed bipartisan. My prediction will be a bipartisan vote. There'll be at least 4 Democrats that vote for him. All we're saying is apply the law as written.
He wrote in his 2006 confirmation hearing, quote, "I would follow Roe versus Wade faithfully and fully. It's been reaffirmed many times."
Yeah. And that may be.
Is that okay with folks who oppose abortion like yourself?
Well, no, of course not. We want, I've read the Constitution in my 19-year legal career. Nowhere in there is there a right to abortion, mind you, but that's a different issue for a different day. But the point of the matter is he is a strict constructionist, and we believe if a case gets before him after he's confirmed, that we have the best opportunity possible to overturn Roe, which just takes it back to the states, doesn't make abortion illegal, mind you.
Okay. What do you think, Ohio? What does Ohio have to gain? Where are the big cases where Ohio will be affected here? Environment, abortion would be a huge one if it ever was changed. What other cases might Justice Kavanaugh decide? I
think that it's interesting because Kavanaugh was originally worked on the Kenneth Starr investigation of Bill Clinton, and he later changed his views on that and said that really a sitting president shouldn't be subjected to intense investigations like that because the job is really like no other, and it takes the focus off. And I think for a lot of Democrats in the Senate, that is a concern, particularly since the Mueller investigation is underway.
Derek, this is a pretty standard conservative justice that any Republican president would have nominated. Would you agree that this?
Absolutely. I mean, time will tell, how his rulings will affect, some of the bigger cases that have been decided by the court, like Roe v. Wade. I'm sorry. But, he's, 53 years old? Mm-hmm. So he's a very young justice. And so he's going to have a lot of time to make some very critical decisions that are going to affect, you know, the way people live in this country.
Joe, liberals are worrying that the court is shifting to the right. But I went back today and looked at Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman appointed 12 justices between them. So at that point, the court was shifting to the left. Is this just part of the long view, the way the court goes in this country? Not just, if you look at just 5 years, 10 years, yeah, it's a big deal. But over the long haul, perhaps not that big a deal.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it historically, it does, you're right. It doesn't have these huge shifts. It's a very incremental, small kind of change. And even, as Mike pointed out, even if they get rid of Roe, you still have abortion in some states. The thing is, it affects where you have abortion and who can get those abortions and at what cost. So, I mean, you know, it's not like there's sweeping changes. It's not like if Brett Kavanaugh gets in, then next week there's going to be all these sweeping changes and we're going to have some major shift immediately. It would take time to get there.
Laura, the current legislature, would they ban abortion in Ohio if Roe is overturned, do you think?
Yes, I think absolutely. There's
Mike,
a big appetite for that. They passed the heartbeat bill out of the House. I think that with the current makeup of the General Assembly, that would happen.
I agree.
Mike, that puts the ball completely into lawmakers' hands now. Republicans and abortion opponents have been able to vote against abortion, but the Supreme Court was always their backstop. Well, they overruled us. We can't do anything. But if they have to vote and then stand behind a vote to ban abortion, when most Americans favor abortion with restrictions, is that a double-edged sword for Republican lawmakers, conservative lawmakers?
No, because the new backstop will be the ballot, the constitutional amendment. So if the legislature, and I would be on the front lines working to pass a law, if the court would ever overturn Roe, that fits Ohio. In our case, to eliminate abortions in Ohio. Every state would do what they want. California would have a much different policy than Ohio, mind you. But at the end of the day, people can go to ballot, and there would be plenty of money to do that, and then the voters can decide after we pass a state law that would impact abortion.
Derek, would a overturning of Roe galvanize Democrats like Roe galvanized Republicans?
I think it would definitely galvanize Democrats, but you know, even if the legislature passed something, when Richard Cordray is governor, he will veto the bill. So there we go.
And I want to bring something up here. We talk about this like, you know, oh, you get rid of abortion. Well, you really don't, because even before Roe versus Wade was a thing, you had illegal abortion. You will still have illegal abortion, and now there's an abortion pill. So, I mean, it makes it, and we've had such wonderful time controlling the drug trade in Ohio. Illegal drugs are everywhere. So you're still going to have problems with, you know, people using that drug on the drug trade, and you'll have illegal abortions anyway. So.
All right. Our next topic, it looks like Governor Kasich's controversial move to adopt a key component of Obamacare will continue no matter who succeeds him. Democrat Richard Cordray has long supported Medicaid expansion. And as we learned this week, so has Republican Mike DeWine. In accepting the endorsement of the Ohio Medical Association, DeWine definitively promised to continue Medicaid expansion, a stance DeWine used against his primary opponent, Mary Taylor, when he called her in an ad a phony conservative.
She supported Barack Obama's Medicaid expansion under Obamacare.
DeWine says there has been no change in his stance. He wants to improve Medicaid expansion by adding a work requirement and wellness checks. Derek Clay, is this news to you? How strong do you think Mike DeWine's support of the Medicaid expansion is?
Well, first of all, I'm happy that he did it. It's the right thing to do. But it's flip-flop city with Mike DeWine. I mean, he flip-flopped in the primary when he was running against Mary Taylor on this issue, and now because it is the right thing to do, and his opponent has supported it, now he's supporting it as well. You know, we've had other examples of that with the ECOT investigation. I mean, he's the top cop on everything else, but when it comes to ECOT, now he's not. So, you know, we have to wonder what type of governor we'll have in Mike DeWine if he were to get elected on key issues like this.
Fact checking, Laura, has he flip-flopped or has he just clarified his stance more clearly?
I tend to think he's clarified, because I remember when I was interviewing him for a profile in the primary, he said that he doesn't like Medicaid expansion as it is right now. It needs improvements. It's not sustainable as it is now. But he was kind of cagey on exactly what he was going to do. I think he just came out and was a lot more clear, saying, I think we need to make improvements to it, but it should stay.
So, Joe, why the clarity?
Well, you know, if you look at what's happening to the Affordable Health Care Act, it's incremental changes. Again, we go back to incremental changes, and they've been chipping away at the federal level, got rid of the facilitators that helped lower income people, you know, determine which health care plan they wanted to use. They went out and they've not required people to buy the health insurance like they used to. All of these things, the experts that are looking at the figures say are changing this program to the point that it's making it more unaffordable. So accessibility, affordability are two different things, but the program did seem to be popular right after President Trump was elected and he tried to get rid of it. It seemed to be pretty popular. So I think they've seen that these incremental changes are much more palatable.
How do Republicans who hate Obamacare and Medicaid expansion view this? Clarity?
Not too favorably. I think, the Libertarian Party, I think, is going to be on the ballot, so you might see a little bit of movement there, and if it's a close election, that may or may not impact it. But, Mike has always said, I call him Mike, should call him Attorney General DeWine, has always said that Medicaid expansion as it currently exists is not fiscally sustainable. We can't do it this way. Okay, so the bottom line is if we all care about the 700,000 people that are currently on Medicaid expansion, we have to fix it, okay, guys, because the money is not going to be there, whether it's the 95-5 rule we currently have now with the feds paying 95%, that's going to get impacted. We don't have the budget in Ohio to do that. So we have to make it better, more efficient, not get rid of it, but make it better and more efficient. Because remember, it was sold to us as a 200,000 person program, and now it's at 700,000. We don't have the finances to do it. So what Mike said, real quick, let's go. Well, Rich Cordray said nothing. He's kicked the can down the road. Betty Sutton yesterday, when asked by Randy Ludlow at the Dispatch, she said, well, I have nothing to say at this time. So if we're going to compare it that way, Derek, Cordray has said nothing, and he continues to say nothing. But at the end of the day, at least Mike's saying, let's have a work requirement. If you can work, let's get you a job. Let's find ways to make it better. There's 150,000 jobs available right now in Ohio Means Jobs. Well, let's try to get some of these people from Medicaid expansion to some of those jobs that offer health care.
Most of the people who are on Medicaid expansion already have jobs. It's like 65, 70%.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I don't know how much that's going to improve the fiscal sustainability of it.
It'd improve a lot if you can eliminate 35% of it or 30%.
Some of those also are disabled and can't work and things like that. But I think I've figured around 20% of folks are able-bodied, to use that term, and could possibly get a job.
Huge impact.
Medicaid expansion.
Huge impact.
All right, be more just for the mill down the road. A bill to limit interest rates charged by payday lenders appears back on track. This week, the Senate passed its version of the bill that would cap interest rates on short-term loans at 28%. The Senate bill is a little more generous to payday lenders than the House bill, but lenders say it would still put them out of business. Consumer advocates praised the Senate plan as a way to eliminate high interest rates the Pew Research Center found to top 500%. Laura Bischoff, is there any real difference between the Senate version and the House version that passed earlier this summer or this spring?
Well, like you said, it's a little bit more favorable to the lenders, but not enough that they got any buy-in from them. It has limits on how much can be loaned out, how much payback can be required. Like I think there's a cap of 7% of net monthly income or 6% of gross. Maybe it's the other way around.
It allows folks to borrow more than the House plan.
Right, and also it allows them longer time to repay. So anyway, most of the payday lenders said that they were doomed under this. It wasn't going to work, and I think that the Senate just kind of got fed up with this mishmash of we want to compromise, but we don't want to compromise approach to things.
Because there wasn't another bill out there that the consumer advocates did not like. Senator Matt Huffman presented a bill that lenders were more inclined to support, but the consumer advocates said it wasn't going to do any good. What happened to that one?
Well, that went by the wayside, but there was something else out there, Mike, that was making this really an important thing to do, and that was there was a citizens group that was going to put something on the ballot if the legislature didn't take some action right away. And I think that was the thing that really a lot of these lawmakers who were in some of these swing districts that are not in solidly red areas, they were looking at that.
Well, I think they were also looking at the optics of, Cliff Rosenberger resigned abruptly after disclosing that he was under investigation by the FBI. And
for his links to payday lending.
For international travel. And we had a story in Dayton Daily about 3 international trips that he took with payday lenders. And I think that it became kind of a real hot potato for the lawmakers. A lot of people were kind of like, we don't going into an election, we do not want to be on the wrong side of this issue.
Congratulations to the Ohio Senate Republican leadership. The House had the bill for 400 days. The Senate had it for about 30 days, and they wrapped it up and got it done quickly. At the end of the day, the industry saying it's going to put them out of business. Baloney. They're going to be in business for years to come. But what this does, Mike, Ohio, there's 34 states that allow payday lending. Ohio was at the top for interest rates. Now we're in the bottom 5. So now we're in one of the 5 states that have the lowest interest rates allowed capped in the nation. So that's good for consumers. The industry can still operate. Kudos to a bipartisan vote in the Senate. The House should approve it.
There was a lot of whipsaw. I'm sorry. There was a lot of whipsawing back and forth, like the life and death of this this bill. You say we have this now. We don't have it yet because it still has to get. The House has to concur with the Senate changes, and then the governor has to sign it.
Well, in a lot of instances, I mean, the people that are benefiting from these loans are in life and death situations sometimes when they need the money, and then the industry was charging so much percent on the loan that they had to get other loans in order to pay off the first loan. So this is something that the legislature should have done a long time ago.
Now, the lenders argue that folks who use these loans and folks who use them responsibly need them, and then they will suffer if they go out of business. You don't agree with that?
I don't agree with that at all.
There is, I mean, like 1 million Ohioans, 1 in 10 use these loans on a fairly regular basis, and the industry will tell you that 40% of Ohioans live paycheck to paycheck, and so they're saying that they fill a niche.
Who will step into that void if the lenders go out of business or their presence diminishes in any way? Are there organizations? I know there was I think it was the Catholic organization that was trying to have an emergency loan fund for folks.
I'll tell you who should think about it is maybe some of these credit unions and places that could offer short-term loans to people that are not payday loans. Those could actually be lucrative, you would think, with the number of people who are actually using these. It's just going to be, you're going to have to get those groups involved, and they have been at the table somewhat, but not fully.
All right, we got to give Stormy Daniels a couple minutes. Now to the oddest story of the week. The Columbus Division of Police inserted itself into the feud between President Trump and adult film star Stormy Daniels. Daniels, whose real name is Stephanie Clifford, and Donald Trump's alleged former mistress, was performing at a local strip club this week. At least 4 undercover Columbus Vice officers say she violated state law by allowing customers to touch her, so they arrested her. Within hours, the city dropped the charges, saying the law did not apply to Stormy Daniels. Joe Ingles, if they had it to do all over again, would Columbus police have arrested Stormy Daniels or just let her have her fun with the patrons of this fine establishment?
I think if they had it to do all over again, they would not do that, especially if you look at Kim Jacobs, the chief, the comments that she made afterwards. I mean, this is a bill that it doesn't get enforced a lot, let's face it, but when it got enforced this time, it made national news, international news, and it didn't particularly look that great for Columbus as a whole. So
this is a law that passed in 2007. It's called the No Touch Rule, and it applies apparently. Why it was not applied to Stormy Daniels is because the law is written to say that regular employees shall not touch the patrons, clothed or otherwise.
Anywhere, in the parking lot.
In a sexually oriented business.
The Community Defense Act, I believe, the Community Defense Act.
Right, and those of us who've been around for a while, we remember the Dancers for Democracy were, trying to get that law overturned.
Yeah, I agree with Joe. I mean, the only reason why this is in the news is because it was Stormy Daniels, and she's been in the national spotlight over the past few months.
The chief, who I would have loved to have seen her face when she got the call at 2 o'clock in the morning that they had arrested Stormy Daniels. I'm sure she was not happy. But she's also looking into motivations of the police officers here, Mike. Do you think there was some politics involved here? One of the officers allegedly had some pro-Donald Trump tweets or Facebook posts.
Look, no one knows for sure. I doubt it. Look, according to the newspaper, there's been investigation going on for a while, alleged human trafficking, prostitution, drugs in this strip club and other strip clubs. There's been 25 arrests already, according to the newspaper, in the strip clubs in the Central Ohio area. So they're doing their jobs. I support the police officers. They're doing this. I mean, human trafficking is a real issue, okay? And how are they to know it was Stormy Daniels? I mean, they arrested 2 other people too,
I
didn't
think they knew.
It was in the marquee.
I don't, look, I have no experience. I don't know.
They knew. But that's all right. Let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Mike Anadakis, you go first.
Transition. Okay. The Supreme Court ruled recently that employees don't have to pay union dues if they don't want to. The state of Ohio just this week said, hey, we are no longer going to automatically deduct from your paycheck that 2.5% if you're in the fair share. But the rest of you union employees, if you don't want to pay, you have to pick up the phone on Monday, call the state of Ohio, call your union, and tell them I don't want to pay anymore because I don't have to.
Derek.
So just this afternoon, a judge here in Columbus ruled that the bump stock ban is unconstitutional, and so the gun debate rages.
All right. Joe.
I moderated the debate between 12th Congressional District, Danny O'Connor and Troy Balderson this week. They're running to replace Pat Tiberi, and the election is in August, and I would urge everyone to go vote on this if you live in that district.
Who won?
Well, I don't know. We didn't really have that. But,
Laura.
I'm considering starting a betting pool to take bets on which state lawmaker will take up a bill to amend the no-touch rule to make sure that it applies to everyone.
I don't know what the odds on that are. I love when people say that 53 is a young age, because I turned 52 the other day, and I waited to get my brand new Ohio driver's license. And I want to give a shout out to the Ohio BMV. This was the first day they were doing these licenses. The website was excellent. It told me exactly what I needed. It gave me a checklist I could print out. I went to the office, the deputy registrar's office on Kinney Road, to give them a shout out. They were asking us in line if we had the stuff, and it went as smooth as silk. So mission accomplished for the BMV, at least on my visit for the new licenses. So congratulations to them. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. We're on Facebook, Twitter. You can see each episode on demand at our website, WOSU.org. For our crew, for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.